Hey guys, this is the first episode of my podcast. I hope you like it. I really, really want you guys to like it. Um, Hi, I'm Brian. This is the first episode of I Should Be Allowed to Think. Um, Got the name from a They Might Be Giants song that I like a lot. I'll talk about that for a little bit later. Just a little bit about myself. I felt like doing a podcast. I regularly co-host the Saturday Nate podcast with my good friend Nate. That's at Twist of Nate on Twitter. That's fun. We used to do it about once a week. Now it's gotten to monthly or bi-monthly sometimes, and lately it's just kind of fallen off. Like we're kind of on hiatus, I guess. And I've appeared on the Brad Needs Friends podcast. That's my brother's podcast a few times. I'll link to both of those in the description because I've podcasted a bit before. Neither of those were my podcast. They were both kind of, one was just me as a guest, fodder for my brother. The other was as a co-host, kind of like a sidekick to Nate. Neither of those were kind of my thing or whatever. They were me augmenting other people. I just felt like doing a podcast. I haven't in a while. I've been pretty bored and just kind of wanted to do something. I initially got this laptop about a year ago thanks to a GoFundMe where I raised some money because I couldn't afford a laptop to make content and things, really, and for gaming and things. But I wanted to podcast and stream and, distribute music and things. And so I raised some money, and then the amount that we raised, Nate matched that amount of money so I could get a laptop. That laptop was accidentally destroyed by my brother, who ran it over, accidentally, ill-advised joke. But he replaced it the next day with another laptop that was more or less the same. And I never really got around to streaming. Like, I have all these emulators on my computer. I went out and bought a Hyperkin controller. The Hyperkin controller doesn't work that well. I don't know if I'm not setting it up right, and setting up the controls right, or if it's just kind of a cheap hunk of plastic, or both. So I really wanted to stream. I wanted to stream some old SNES games and maybe some Steam games, but I just haven't really. I don't want to play with a keyboard. I don't like it. I'm a console person, so playing on a PC, I want it to be as close to a console as possible, especially if I'm doing like emulations of old Super Nintendo games. So until I can get my controller to work as a way to do that, I can't really stream. I wanted to release music, which I've been able to do much easier and promote my music. I sing in two punk bands, Windpipe and The Wrong Theories. I might talk about them for a little bit, but it's not really important to this. But I wanted to podcast. I've been really bored and kind of not had a lot to do lately. My hours got cut recently, so I'm kind of like sitting around like, oh, well, what am I going to do to feel like I'm doing something? I was like, oh, I'll start my own podcast because I'm not on Brad's very often. Nate hasn't been doing his. I just want to talk about some stuff that I think is interesting or that I like. And hopefully maybe I can get some guests on. We can get some specific topics together that people like to talk about. And maybe some people will like to listen to it. I mean, whether or not they do, I guess is whatever. Because it's more for me just to have something to do. I got my big cup of water here. I got my small cup of espresso. Just so I have something, to sip at or whatever while I'm talking. And mostly I want to talk, I guess, just about stuff I think is interesting or fun. Nate's podcast is kind of him talking about current events and his feelings about them, in regards to pop culture, whatever's going on. We talk a lot about Twitter because that's kind of the environment that podcast is based around, and we kind of shit talk, and it's kind of ironic and detached, and it's kind of us playing versions of ourselves a lot of the time. That's not what this is. Brad's podcast is very sincere. It's very earnest and personal, and it's more about him opening up, and he does funny stuff, but it's more about getting to know people and getting to know himself or whatever, and I like it. But that's a little bit too personal and confessional for what I would want to do regularly also. I just want to talk about, I guess, stuff I like. Music and movies, video games, fast food. There's a million podcasts like this. There's literally no reason for you to listen to this one as opposed to the millions of others like this. Unless, for whatever reason, you like me more than them. I feel like that's the one thing with a podcast is you find a person you like, and they should follow some subjects that you care about or want to learn about. But it's kind of having like a rapport, I guess. With it's kind of like when you watch a late night TV show host, their jokes are all more or less the same, but everyone has like one or two that they really like and not the other ones, and that's more an identifier, like thing. It's a personal thing. Um, and that's how I guess I feel about podcasting, and I just want to talk about some stuff for a while and have some fun with it. Um, so I'm working on a list right now. I've got a list going, a few things to talk about. First off, I guess I want to say anyone that's listening to this, if you ever have a question, a comment, you can get a hold of me at my Twitter account at __ CAD __. That's pronounced CAD, as in the old, like, what, 40s or 50s, maybe early 60s expression. It's like, oh, what a cad, which I guess means a person who's trying really hard to look cool and fit in, and they just end up making themselves look like a jackass. It's like, oh, that's me, and I like that expression. I just like the way it sounds. Oh, look at that fucking cad. What a cad, So that's me. I was like, oh, that's me. You can get a hold of me at my Ask FM, which is JLo Biafra, which was my old Twitter name for years, but I got sick of it. Which I'll link to both of those in the description. I'll link to some of my band stuff. I might talk about my band Windpipe a little bit and just kind of music in general, like what's going on, I think, in our spectrum of music, which is like punk rock, locally and more mainstream wise, and in like underground scenes and bands that I like and bands I don't like. I don't really feel like talking about the Wrong Theories. That band is more like a thing I've been doing for a while with my friend, and it's kind of personal, and I'm kind of winding down with it, more or less. I'm kind of like, okay, this is this thing that we're doing, and I don't know. I just don't have a lot to say about it. I mean, not that there's a whole lot to say about Windpipe. Windpipe are just a fast, kind of thrashy, supposed to be fun, kind of funny, like late 70s, early 80s, like punk band, So it's not super original or groundbreaking. And if anyone has anything that they'd like to come on and talk about, shoot me. I'll send out my email address. I'll give you my Twitter, my AskFM. Contact me, and if I like your idea, and if you seem like you have something to say about it that I think sounds cool, I'll get a hold of you and be like, hey, that's cool. Do you want to come on the podcast? If you're not comfortable doing that, maybe write me a letter that I can read out and respond to. Or if you just want me to talk about it and you don't want to talk about it at all, that's cool. I'm going to take a break for a second. We're at 8 minutes now. Just make sure everything sounds good. And make sure that I have enough stuff together for my list and everything. And then we'll get going, all right? Be right back. And we're back. Hey, I just went and I took a shower and shaved, and I put on some clothes that I like because, I don't know, I was getting a little nervous. Never podcasted by myself before, and I wanted to feel comfortable, which is silly because nobody's here. No one can see me. Just me talking in a room to a microphone by myself. But wanted to put on some clothes that I think look maybe not cool, but like kind of funny and different that I like. For a long time I just dressed really, really nondescript: hoodies, jeans, t-shirt, whatever. And it was comfortable and whatever. And I always thought, like, yeah, I want to dress like better, or like something that I think is cooler and more interesting. But I always thought, like, well, that's not for me. People like me don't dress cool. I should just dress in things that I know look okay and don't look weird on me. But my bands have started playing more shows out recently, and I'm the frontman in both bands. I wanted to look cool and like whatever my idea of like punk or whatever was. And I've always hated I've had a few leather jackets that I think look nice, but I've always hated like mohawks and spikes and pins and patches everywhere. But I've always really liked like late 70s, early 80s, like new wave style, and I kind of wanted to look more like that, even though the type of music I make is a lot noisier, not very much like that. So one of my roommates, she goes to a lot of auctions, and she got this like professor's coat, like a college professor's coat or whatever, with like leather patches on a tweed jacket type thing, and she like gave it to me, and I was like, I think this will look really good on you. And she was sincere, and I was like, I don't know, like why would I wear that? But then I was thinking about stuff I could wear for shows that were upcoming. I took this shirt and I was like, oh, this looks really goofy on me, and I started wearing like kind of ratty like band T-shirts. Like I have this like old like cigarette stained Minor Threat T-shirt that the guitarist of Windpipe, who's much older than me, gave me, and I would wear that under this really kind of serious looking professor's jacket with leather patches and all. And then I would wear like kind of just solid black jeans because I don't have like kind of skinny black slacks, although I'd like some. And then I found this other jacket that was like a suit, like the top part of a suit, like the coat part, that my good friend Billy gave me years ago. And again, he gave it to me sincerely because he was like, in case you ever want a suit because you have like a job interview. And I was like, okay. And I never really did anything with it because I've never had a job interview or anything that where wearing like a business suit or whatever would be appropriate. But then I found it and I was like, oh yeah, I could wear that on stage. And so I put that on, and underneath it I put on another shirt that Billy gave me because didn't fit him anymore or whatever, that he gave me sincerely. It was just the black shirt with like a white skull with angel wings or something. And I was like, that's in my head. I was like, that's a little silly. I don't know when I'd wear that. But then I thought it would look really funny to wear that with the business suit. Like neither of them look like things I would wear, and they definitely don't belong together. I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I put those on, got all ready to podcast. Billy's a great guy. He's been my friend since high school. Went to high school together. We hung out a lot when I still lived in that town where I grew up, which is in northeastern Wisconsin. He does Let's Plays. He used to do a podcast. I don't know if he does anymore. I think he does wrestling kind of videos, or he commentates on what he thinks is going on, or how he feels about what's going on in pro wrestling right now. And he does pretty good Let's Plays. Very nice guy. Very knowledgeable about the games that he likes. And I'm gonna link to his YouTube profile, so you guys, if you feel like it, can check out his LPs. Lately I've been looking at just to round out like having like a look or whatever that I like and think is cool and fun or whatever, like getting golf pants, like blue and white flannel golf pants, or like I found these ones online that look like the Cubert blocks, just all over pants. It's like, oh, I could wear that with like some like darky suits, and then I could get like, I want to get some skinny ties like a new wave band would have, and then I need like an undershirt that will like kind of that the tie can go over, so I need to find something for that. And I don't know why I'm talking about this. I just, the first time in my life that I've ever been interested in kind of getting a look together, that I've like expressed something like fun or whatever about myself, as opposed to just putting on whatever clothes I guess people wouldn't think would look weird. Like I would wear like hoodies and t-shirts and jeans, and I was like, all right, that looks all right, because I knew that's what people expected me to wear, and wearing anything else made me feel really awkward. But when I dress like this, and I don't all the time, and I don't like at work obviously or anything, in like kind of goofy, flamboyant, like ironic clothes or whatever, I don't really think of it as ironic. Like it's funny and there's like irony to it, but I genuinely think it like looks cool. And then I'm like, oh, this is cool. I feel really good about myself right now, or at least better than I normally do. And just check. Right before I started recording, I made some posts to see if anyone had any questions or topics, but it looks like no one has sent me any. Please do eventually, because I'm gonna run out of shit to talk about at some point if I keep doing these like every week or whatever. Need someone to bounce ideas off of, at least to some degree. But I thought about a few things I want to talk about. I want to review a graphic novel that I got for Christmas from my girlfriend. She knows I really like horror stuff. She knows I really like graphic novels and comic books. And she got me a couple. I haven't read One of them I haven't read yet. I say read, but there's actually no dialogue to it. It's all pictures. And I just like, I should read that soon. I haven't yet, but it looks really interesting. I'll probably review that in a future episode. The other one is about the Axeman of New Orleans. New Orleans. Um, if I was from the South, I'd say New Orleans because I think that sounds cooler. And my natural inclination is probably more to say New Orleans, but that sounds so goofy that I try to strike a middle ground, so it's New Orleans, which kind of awkward. It doesn't really run together the way that either of the other ones, fit together. New Orleans. The X-Men of New Orleans is what I'm really interested in serial killers, and I don't like to do that weird thing where I don't think they're cool. I don't collect shit by them or have pictures by them. I think that's weird, but I do like to read about them, and I don't know how much of it is like morbid and how much of it is just like a historical interest. The X-Man of New Orleans is one of my favorites because kind of an American equivalent to Jack the Ripper, but not really, I guess. Let me just grab this and take a look at it because it's been a little while since I read it. So the deal with the Axeman of New Orleans is that he killed people, he or she or they killed people with an axe in New Orleans in 20s, late 1900s. Let me check. I want to say mostly like the 20s and maybe even into the 30s. It must have been the 20s. Right in like the heart of like inner city New Orleans, jazz is really big nightlife scene. And it's pretty unclear how he was able exactly to get into people's homes. It looks like he would carve these small kind of openings into doors that it would be really weird for someone to be able to crawl through and then get in and then find an axe. Usually in the home, he'd find an axe. He didn't have a single axe. And he would murder whoever was inhabiting this house. And there's a lot of theories about him and things. There's like in the neighborhood he was in, there's a lot of petty problems between grocers and things, and some people think that there might have been some familial rivalry elements, but he's never been conclusively, like, no one knows for sure who he was. The really cool thing to me about the Axeman of New Orleans is that he wrote this letter where he said that he was going to go on a killing spree, just a rampage from house to house, and he loved jazz music, and that any house where he came up to and jazz music was playing, he wouldn't invade. So people would just play jazz. They'd play it on records. They'd get bands together in their house and they'd just play jazz music all night long. And some houses that purportedly weren't playing jazz that night, he attacked. I don't remember if there were any kills that night, but there are reports that people had heard him and even like seen him running away. Someone heard him kind of scratching at their door, the sound of what they believed was him carving his little entry that they'd read about in the papers, shot a shotgun through their door, and then were able to see him running away. I really am interested in this story. A famous jazz composer whose name escapes me actually wrote a song specifically for it, for the Axeman Swing, the Axeman's Jazz. I don't remember. I'll get back to you, and I'll either put it in the notes for this episode or I'll clarify on a future podcast. So I got this graphic novel as a Christmas present. It's just the history and the story of the Axeman of New Orleans. One thing with any sort of true crime publication or movie or whatever that makes me kind of wary sometimes is that it's presented tastefully, because these are real lives, these are real events. You want to make things interesting, but I think there's a certain point where it becomes lurid and not really tasteful. This is actually a very engaging, pretty creepy, and very tasteful and historically focused graphic novel. Very much about the culture around New Orleans at the time. Gets into a bit what it was like for recent immigrants to the city. The influence of jazz on it. It's very short, but it covers a lot about the mood and things prevailing at the times. And just a lot of historical, like, as much as can be confirmed about this case is in there. It's a very historical book. I really like it. The art style is Not really wacky. It kind of reminds me. It's a tiny bit more cartoony than if you ever read those classics illustrated, which are drawn very dryly. Has a little bit more kind of punch and kind of emotion to its drawings. I really like the line work. The facial expressions can be kind of funny sometimes. Funny, I think, on purpose, where it shows people looking scared and things. But for the most part, it's a documentation through a graphic novel of this period. I really like it. This is by Rick Geary. It's The Terrible Axeman of New Orleans. Let's see. This was published, it looks like, by NBN Comics Lit. Comics Lit, I'm going to assume that they do things sort of similar to Classics Illustrated, where it's, quote unquote, serious, comics or graphic novels. Looks like this was. It looks like actually Rick Geary has worked on some Classics Illustrated. So I'm looking at about the author section now. It looks like he wrote and illustrated this. Very good. It basically goes through everything that we know about the Axemen in a very concise, short way. Gets involved a bit with the culture around New Orleans at the time. I just really like it. I would recommend it a lot. It's not long. I think I read it in an hour. Yeah, about an hour probably, give or take. And if you like stuff like that, if you like true crime, if you like kind of historical, I guess, graphic novels, I actually heard about this and I think I mentioned it to my girlfriend. Yeah, must have, because some website did a list of like cool horror graphic novels for October, and I was like, oh, look at these, don't these look cool? And she remembered, which is really thoughtful. That's how she got the other one too, which looks like it's a little bit more of like a surrealist dark comedy. And I want to review that on a future one. I haven't read it yet. So there's that. The Terrible Axeman of New Orleans. One of the more interesting graphic novels I've read in a while. I still like superheroes. I really love Spider-Man, and I'll pick up an old graphic novel that I liked as a kid from time to time. But other than Spider-Man, I don't really have any interest in superhero comics right now. I just love Spider-Man though. Hopefully always will. Really want to get caught up and find out what's going on with the Miles Morales character, because so out of the loop, but I think that's really interesting. And I think it was about time to retire Peter anyways. But anyways, so that's just one of my more favorite kind of comic books that I've read in a long time. I don't think it's new. Really trying to find on a publisher's date, like the year it was published. 2010. So it's a little new. It's relatively new, I guess. Very good if you like kind of historical dramas, if you are interested in things about true crime, serial killers, if you like good kind of like, I don't know, like the Classics Illustrated type things. This isn't quite Classics Illustrated. This is a story about a historical event, not an adaptation of a classic story. But it's very much like that, and then I would recommend this to you. I just like it a lot. Let's see. What else do we have? Oh, I know. I want to talk about the Evil Dead movies and the video games and the TV show, just because it's a thing that I like a lot, and I figured I would just talk about it for a little bit. I think the show just finished their first season. I thought I'd get into it a little bit, why I like it so much, stuff I really don't like about it, especially as I get older, how I feel about the video games, the comic books, the TV series, the movies, and any prospects for an Evil Dead 4, which I used to think was a really cool idea, and now I just, whatever, especially with the TV show out now and with the games. Also want to just let you know I was re-listening back to the first portion of the podcast and realized that you can hear some kind of murmurs in the background. That's because one of my roommates is downstairs. He's practicing guitar. It doesn't seem to be too distracting, but if it is, let me know. It doesn't. It sounds really faint to me. It just sounds like a murmury kind of bass that you can hear under. I did move where I was sitting so that my laptop could charge for a bit, and I just wanted to keep podcasting and keep recording. So I'll listen back and see if this sounds worse or anything. Okay. So, anyways, the Evil Dead movies are probably as a series, my favorites ever. Maybe not my single favorite movie. There might be a single movie I like more, but as a series of movies that have like influenced me and how I think about, I guess, horror and comedy and the way to I guess the way to present a movie and to move it along. Like the characterization isn't very good. The plots are bare bones, but the way that those movies are paced, especially the first two, I really like. I think it's really effective and kind of disorienting and really builds tension well. Um, I I've always loved Army of Darkness. My mom and my oldest brother just loved that movie. And when I was a toddler, my oldest brother, Brandon, played it all the time. So I just loved it. I thought it was so funny and cool and full of action. I didn't know there were other movies because it works as a standalone movie. I mean, like, it's weird that a standalone movie would have that kind of intro and backstory, but I was like a toddler. It never occurred to me. I just thought that was the story. A few years later, when I was about 10, my dad found his old VHS of the first Evil Dead. And I looked at the back and he said, "Do you want to watch this?" And was kind of trying to freak me out. And I was like, "Oh, is this a sequel to Army of Darkness?" And he said, "No, it's the movie before it." So I said, "Oh, let's watch this." And we watched it in my grandparents' den, like late at night. Probably not that late, but late to me because I was 10 at the time. And I was so scared by it. I was just couldn't stop watching it, and I was like clutching a pillow, and I thought it was so gory and violent and creepy and so different from Army of Darkness. And I didn't sleep all night because I was so freaked out by it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Um, I started just thinking about it all the time, just how scary it was and how cool it was and how gory it was and how bizarre it was. Really, it was just a weird movie. It's just a bunch of people go to a cabin, they start getting possessed, and they all chop each other up and rip each other apart. And there's just this one person left. And I was like, oh, and that leads into Army of Darkness. Well, that actually leads into Evil Dead 2, which I learned really quickly because I asked my dad all about it and started reading about it online. Um, and I eventually talked my mom into letting me get my own DVD copy of the first Evil Dead, and then I would just watch it on our PS2, which was the first DVD player I think we had. I'd just watch it like a couple nights a week, and I'd get so scared and I'd have nightmares and have a hard time sleeping, but I would just love it. I thought it was so cool. And shortly after that, I got Evil Dead 2, which it's really obvious how that bridges the gap between the first movie, which is more or less straight horror. People say that it's a horror comedy, but it's there's funny slapstick stuff in it, like the blood shooting out of the walls and filling up the light bulb, and when he hits Linda's head off with the shovel. Like there's slapstick elements. The first Evil Dead is very clearly intended to be a scary movie. Um, Evil Dead 2 is a horror comedy for sure. Um, and that really bridges the gap between the first Evil Dead and Army of Darkness. And then I eventually got a DVD of Evil Dead 2, so now that I had all three movies, I would just watch them all the time. I thought they were so cool. For a long time, for like years and years, probably at least once a month, I would do a night where I'd watch all three of them. I think I did that up until probably 2 years ago or so. Just once in a while, I would just watch all those movies because I just thought I still think they're just so cool. I got all the video games, which actually within the last few years, I got all the video games, which I had already gotten really bad reviews. That the controls aren't very good. Excuse me. That the voice acting is hammy and doesn't work. Well, it's Bruce Campbell, so it should be hammy. I actually think that the PS2 games, Fistful of Boomstick and Regeneration, are pretty fun. Their controls are not great. They're kind of clunky, but they feel like Evil Dead movies. They feel like continuations of that story. They're fun adventures. You get to chop up demons. It's kind of funny and weird. It works. I only just recently, like 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, found a copy of the PS1 game, Hail to the King. Is it Hail to the King or Ashes to Ashes? Ashes to Ashes is a comic book, sorry. A comic book miniseries. It's Hail to the King, which I've heard is really bad. It's a PS1 game, and I believe it. I'm pretty sure it controls like an early Resident Evil game with like the tank controls. So that has the potential to be very bad. I haven't gotten to play it yet. I'm hopefully going to get my TV set up in my bedroom sometime this week and my PS2 set up and finally get to play it. And I'm really excited for that, even if it's really bad, just because I've been waiting so long to play that game. What I really don't like, and it always bugged me, even when I was about 10 or so, and as I become more like conscious of things like this, I don't know what it, like. There's no characterization in those movies to any of the women, and part of it is that it's like, I guess, supposed to be like hokey or whatever, but it really just seems like Raimi just does not. It doesn't occur to him to write like women that are interesting. Like it doesn't occur at all, and that's really annoying and depressing because they're like, I don't know, that would make the movie so much more engaging. I know they're all centered around Bruce Campbell's character, anyways. He's the only character in any of the movies with any level of real characterization, and even his is so broad as to be almost non-existent. But then there's the whole like tree rape scene in the first movie, which I've always thought was like, why is that in there? Like even as a little kid, like what? Like, I mean, when I was a really little kid, I thought it was scary. Now I just think it's gross, and I'm just like, what? This is so weird. This just doesn't need to be here. It doesn't add anything. Um, if nothing else, at least Raimi in commentaries and things seems embarrassed by it now, and he kind of goes, "Oh God," whenever he's doing a commentary. I wish he would flat out say, "Oh, this is bad. It shouldn't be in there," because it's like what is that? Like I don't know. It's just tacky and kind of exploitative and dehumanizing, and and as I recall, it's not really. It's played to be kind of scary, but it's kind of played as like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing in the first one, which is really disconcerting. Especially because the whole movie, like, I don't know, like, trauma is kind of treated in the first Evil Dead as a real thing, I guess, which I like, and I definitely think that's better. But it's not. I don't think Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness were supposed to be like that. I think there was an attempt at that in the first one. I don't know, that scene just really kills momentum in the movie and takes me out of it. It makes me go, like, why the fuck is this in here? And then you look at the other movies. I I can't tell how much of it is supposed to be that Ash is dumb and that Sam Raimi is just dumb and doesn't know how to write women or doesn't care to. It's pretty irritating, especially because I love those movies. I love them. I want to love them more. Um, and I know like lots of women that love them like the same way. I don't see any reason that they shouldn't be part of that experience, I guess, and feel that way about it. So every time I watch it now, I'm just like, why? Um, I've only seen the first 4 episodes of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, the recent TV series that's on Stars. This corrects this a bit from what I've seen. It adds women who are supporting characters who don't necessarily revolve around Ash. I mean, he's still the main character, but they have personalities and things, and there's still a lot of dumb sex jokes and just kind of, I don't know, doofy old guy, like, sex humor and stuff, and, like, men and women observational stuff, and it always kind of seems, at least now, like the point. I don't know if there's a lot of it. It comes up a couple of times in one episode, I remember. I don't think it's supposed to be that Bruce Campbell's character Ash is cool and knows this. He says stuff like that. I think it's supposed to be that he's dumb, but I'm not quite sure, and I haven't seen enough of the series yet. I think they just finished their first season to know for sure. And I do want to watch through the series because I want to see how it is. But I'm really hoping that because there are 2 main characters that are women, and they both seem to be starting their own arcs. And one of them has, so far, I think, a really interesting kind of story that's, for the most part, at least in the episodes I've seen, which are the first few episodes of the series, mostly independent of Ash and his kind of, ensemble. So I really hope that they start to kind of are like correcting that. And they're, I don't know, making the show. I don't think Evil Dead should be like a progressive statement thing. I just think that there's no reason that it should be that, I guess, like whitewashed and just like a white guy because it's so popular and it's such a basic story that like it should just be like a like kind of fun, gory, violent fantasy romp. And it does seem like the show is kind of making like headway in that or attempting to. And there are like dumb jokes in there that are, I don't know, just doofy stuff like that I would expect, I guess, from a B horror type thing. But I'm hoping that that kind of gets better and that the supporting characters, because there are a few supporting characters and they seem like they are very different from any character that's been in any sort of Evil Dead related media. Um, that I'm hoping that they develop as characters with their own arcs and things like they have been, that's separate from Ash, and it isn't all just about how Ash is awesome. Although that is what Army of Darkness is and what the last half of Evil Dead 2 is, and it's a lot of fun. And it does seem like a lot of the first episode of Ash vs. the Evil Dead was like that, because, it does do a lot of fan service things. It absolutely does. And why wouldn't it, because they know who's watching it. But I'm going to continue watching that now. My brother has told me for a while he can hook me up with all the episodes on a flash drive or something, and I'm going to watch them. And as I watch them, I think I'm going to keep commenting on them and telling you what I think. I'm a huge Evil Dead fan, and part of that's why I'm not going to be like, oh, it's not that bad. That actually makes it more disconcerting for me. I like this series. I want it to be as good as I think it can be, and I want it to be welcoming to as many people as it can be. I still want it to be gory and violent and kind of lowbrow and not necessarily always in the best taste because it's a gory horror comedy. I'm sorry. When I say not in the best taste, I mean that I don't want it to be shooting for high drama. I think that would be silly, and I think that it's better than that. Sorry, I was having some mic issues there. God, this is so much better when I'm sitting at a desk. Sorry, Nate. You're totally right. My fault. So I'm gonna try to get hooked up with the rest of that series now, and watch an episode or two, and then talk about it on the podcast and keep going. Whether it gets better or worse, I want to talk about it because it's a silly series, but it's important to me. I think in my kind of creative development, and how it's morbid, but it also seems really at least attempting at times to be cutesy and things. The comic books are awful. I've never, ever, ever, ever read an Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, Ash, whatever comic book that wasn't just dumb and lazy and I don't care to talk about them. I mean, there's a lot of them, and I'd like to read a few because there are a lot, and maybe some of them are really good. There's no reason with that story, with how popular that character is and how broad he is and how much can be done with that universe, that you couldn't write a really cool, interesting kind of adventurous fantasy story, horror story with him and still be true to the character in comic books. But all the ones I've read are just hacky garbage. Sorry. One other thing, I find that a lot of people, when they are talking about the first Evil Dead, or they think they talk about it like it's a horror comedy. They're actually talking about the second one. It seems like in people's heads those two movies are the same movie and they kind of bleed together. The first movie's a drive-in movie. It's supposed to be scary. There's stuff like the blood running down the screen, the blood shooting out of the wall into Ash's face. Some of the slapsticky stuff that's there to be funny, but it's definitely not. It's an eerie movie that's supposed to build tension, and whether you think that it's creepy or not, that's a matter of what you find scary and your taste. But I think that movie kind of gets overshadowed by the sequels, which are more quotable, have more kind of goofy, weird stuff in them. But I would like it more if when people talked about the first Evil Dead movie, they talked about it kind of because I do think it's separate from 2 and 3. All the movies are kind of separate entities. They're all by different companies, and they're all kind of pretty noticeably different in their aesthetic and in what they're doing. But that movie especially, I think, is separate from 2 and 3 to the point where 2 basically acts, as a remake as well as a continuation of the story as the first one, because it was just that different, I think. I've also heard that there's stuff where they couldn't get the rights to the original footage. I don't know what that's about. And that's part of the reason why they kind of remake it in the first act before continuing with the sequel. But I don't know. I just think that's interesting how people always go oh, the first Evil Dead is not really the good one. Well, it is really, it's at least as good as the second one. It's very different. I definitely think it has the best special effects of any movie. I think the monsters in the first Evil Dead look so scary and creepy. And I really like the stop motion that's in there, especially at the end. I think that's so inventive and fun and ghoulish looking. Oh, and the remake. I just want to talk about so when the remake got announced, it was the same with when the TV show got announced. I was so excited. I went to go see the Evil Dead remake, the more recent one, in theaters, shortly after it opened, and I was so happy, so happy, because I never thought that I'd get to see an Evil Dead movie in theaters. Least of all, a new one, in my lifetime. I just thought I was not going to get that chance. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's not about Ash. It's not about any of that. It's a very serious movie. It's a very violent, gory movie. Still feels like it's an Evil Dead movie. It's pretty much all practical effects, like the first two movies are. It's not about Ash. It's a lot more serious in tone, and I don't want to give. Not that there's a lot to give away. Like there's smirks and things to the old movies, but they're done differently. It's a very modern horror movie, and I thought it was really cool and really scary, and it was very cool to see. And I thought it was the type of movie that if you were younger and not maybe a big old horror person, like you didn't really like old horror movies and things, that like you'd be able to watch that movie just as its own movie and really like it. And if you were really an Evil Dead fan and you weren't just going like, oh, Bruce Campbell's not in it, it's not funny, it's not the Evil Dead, then, but if you just were like looking at the aesthetic of the movies and how they feel and kind of what they're about evoking, that sort of feeling of like fun, having fun being scared, I think that the remake did a really good job of that. I really, really liked the lead actress they got in it. I thought she was not really, she's not like she's not Bruce Campbell at all. She's a new character, and there's a lot less broad. Well, she's pretty broad, but she's a lot less goofy than Campbell is. She is pretty broad, I guess. I was gonna say she's more subtle. She's really not. They're not subtle movies, and the remake is no exception. But she's playing much more tormented. When Campbell played tormented, like in the second movie a lot, it was still like for laughs. It's like, oh, he's going crazy and he's demented. She's playing tormented as like an actual feeling that she's dealing with. And I like it a lot. I just like that movie. I was really excited. I got it on DVD as soon as it was out. It's a good series. It's fun. There's a lot of people that are big fans of it. If you disagree with me or anything on it, and you like that series, or if you think it sucks, you can send me an email or something, and like I'll read it, or I'll talk to you on the podcast if you want. I don't care. That'll be fun. I like talking about stuff. There was other stuff I want to talk about. Let me go consult my list and let my laptop charge for a little bit, and we'll probably wrap this up in our very last segment. All right, so very last thing I want to talk about tonight is Top of the Pops, the show that ran in the UK from, I'm not sure, I want to say that from like the mid 60s until sometime in the late 90s, maybe later, maybe a few years on. I started watching it every night with my girlfriend. We both like music, and we like listening to different kinds of music, whether it's something we like or not, just hearing things and think about them. And we really like to talk with each other about music and stuff, so we started watching a couple episodes of Top of the Pops a night. And I just think it's really interesting how that show works as a time capsule for different types of music. You see these novelty acts or these one-hit things that you've never heard of next to great songs and super influential bands, especially like we mostly watch episodes from the late 70s to early 80s because that's mutually our favorite era in music, I would say, or at least like a really important one to both of us. And one of the cool things is we get to hear songs that one of us or both of us really loves, like songs by I don't like a lot of like disco and new wave and things, especially like there's a lot of new wave played. Late 70s, early 80s punk and new wave is my absolute favorite type of music. And especially like aesthetically and stylistically, that era for new wave I think is like the coolest thing. Like the music I play is more heavier, louder, kind of aggressive punk rock, but I think that type of pop aesthetic in kind of a meta context like early new wave did, like the B-52s and Devo, is just the coolest thing. I think that is everything about punk to me, kind of, because it's about infiltrating like what the tradition is and not necessarily being, oh, this sucks, even though I think stereotypically that's what a lot of punk does. But I don't really think that's what like the Ramones and things did either. I think it's more about building on that and making it something new and making it an alternative that doesn't have to be as click oriented, although punk becomes that, especially as it became more, I think, hyper masculine and guitar driven and leads to hardcore things. But what's really cool is that I'm finding a lot of bands that maybe had one or two hits in the UK or something for a brief span that are really interesting. Um, a lot of weird new wave bands that I've just never heard of, and that they have these great songs on there, and a lot of like pop bands and things that I really like. Um, my favorite band that we've seen is this band called Hot Chocolate, who is kind of like this rough kind of funk, like R&B band, like they're not really rockish, although they definitely like they have like electric guitars and things. It's definitely like sturdy, kind of powerful R&B, and it's just the coolest music I've ever heard. Um, and this artist who did a song called Birdsong, I can't remember her name. She was an opera singer, and it was kind of post-punk and new wave, and very, very melodramatic and theatrical and cool. And I want to look up an album by her. I can't remember her name now, but I would like to listen to albums by Hot Chocolate and the artist who did Birdsong, and then eventually give my thoughts on them. I want to listen to old albums I liked at some point on this podcast as well, and kind of see maybe albums I haven't thought about in a few years that I loved, and see how they've aged for me personally and what I think of them now, what I still like about them and what I don't, and listen to albums because I have this huge, ever expanding list of albums and artists to listen to. Like, I never get through it. I thought maybe if I made it a segment on the podcast to listen to an album or two a week that I haven't listened to before, that would give me some incentive to finally do it and put my thoughts together for it. I thought that would be really cool. So that's a thing I'm looking at doing. And if you ever have any recommendations for an album for me to listen to, please do. I don't have anything to review this week as far as albums because I just wasn't prepared to. But I'm going to continue to talk about music. That's probably the most like important part of my life as far as something I do. There's a lot of things that are interesting to me, a lot of things I want to do, but I think about music constantly. And I always am open to hearing new and interesting things. And I always want to listen to more music than I do because I don't really have the longest attention span. But if you have an idea for something you'd like me to listen to, recommend it to me. And if I put it on my list of albums for the podcast, I'll probably listen to it a lot quicker because then I'll have an incentive to. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. Maybe I'll even play clips from it, like short ones, so I don't get into any legal trouble. Anyone, really, if you want to recommend an album to me, and it can be like a punk album, it can be a new wave album, it can be something like experimental techno, something that you might like that I normally would listen to. If you think it's something I would never listen to in a million years, go ahead and recommend it, and I'll consider listening to it and reviewing it for the podcast, because I just think that would be a lot of fun. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up here. This has been fun for me. It's given me something to do throughout the day. This is episode 1 of my solo podcast, or if I ever get guests in the future, at least my podcast that I'm in charge of. That's I Should Be Allowed to Think. That's a song by the Talking Heads. It's meant to be satirical and about stuck-up kind of people who think that they matter when they don't, but I choose to interpret it unironically. And yeah, one of the lines is I should have a call-in show. I don't know. You can look it up if you want. This is my podcast. I'm going to talk about fast food. I'm going to talk about movies and TV and comic books and music and how I feel about that, good or bad. Sometimes it might get kind of serious as far as if I think something is offensive or if I think something's really important. I don't really want to delve into anything beyond that, though. I want to talk about things that I like, things that are interesting and important to me that I think are fun for people to talk about. I mean, maybe they're not fun for you to talk about, but they're fun for me to talk about. If you want to be a guest, if you have a question, if you have any sort of recommendation, you can email me at brianpfaffj@gmail.com. That's brianpfaffj@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at __CAD__. That's pronounced CAD. That's it, CAD. Any questions about anything at all? Any comments, any suggestions? You want to be a guest? You want to write an email, a letter? I'll read it out and I'll respond to it. You want to troll the shit out of me? I don't care. This is fun for me. Well, today it was kind of nerve-wracking because I've never done this before. But so far it's fun for me, I think, and it's going to be more fun. So I hope you like things. I might end. I might add some music later. Like a theme or something. Hopefully the segues will get less awkward because today it was just kind of that I would run out of things to say about a topic and then pause for a while. Um, Thanks for listening. If anybody listened, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. This is episode 1 of I Should Be Allowed to Think. I'm Brian, and it's my podcast, and it's fun.